Our guest today will be the legendary Vince Russo, who has a lot of explaining to do. And I'm sure it'll be a great show. And we wrapped up SummerSlam, had a great weekend with Steve. You drank every bottle of Crown Royal, not only in the Sheraton in Brooklyn, but in what's the other hotel you drank all Crown Royal?
Across the street.
Austin witnessed it, so we have an eyewitness.
Yeah, we did have a few of the boys give me a standing ovation for drinking all the Crown Royal, and then the next
I heard it yesterday at TV. Good Lord. Why my name is always involved. Jeez. Can somebody do something with a woman, or somebody can do something with alcohol and leave my name out of it just one time?
No,
please?
I feel like that would be gimmick infringement if we didn't give you the credit.
Yeah, right.
So, Rick, let's talk about SummerSlam for a minute. A lot of people think that's one of the better shows they've put on in a long, long time. You and I talked a little bit. What did you think about Seth Rollins' performance at SummerSlam, man?
Oh, my God. I thought the match was absolutely tremendous on both Seth Rollins and John Cena's part. It was phenomenal. I mean, I didn't realize that I knew Seth was a finesse guy, and I knew he had some gymnastic ability. Not a gymnast at all, actually, but he's able to do all that. But I didn't realize how strong he was when he did that roll through and picked up John Cena, just as John had done to him before. I just almost fell out of my chair. It was a phenomenal performance, a phenomenal match. I'm not sure that the finish was what the people wanted. On a personal level, I liked being on Raw Monday night, so I'm not upset that they did that. But it wouldn't have, by any means upset me if John Cena had won both titles. But I also think that John doesn't need the title right now, and it'd be really stupid to pull back Seth Rollins' momentum.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the show. I thought that match was one of the more underrated matches that we'd seen in a while because the finish, a lot of people weren't really tickled with. But when you just go back and watch
the match was fabulous. The match with Undertaker and Brock Lesnar was fabulous. Jeez. I don't know how many more of those Marks got in him, man. Jesus. It's not that Mark can't do it, but I don't know. I don't know if anybody that could do it on a regular basis. I think it's almost it's a given, and I think it's a good deal that Brock only works part-time. We don't have too many guys that could take that punishment every day. So, but it was a great match. I thought Mark was phenomenal, and as I've told people before, when you only work once a year or twice a year, it's really hard to get that stamina and that stamina, endurance, whatever it is, back in full track. But he looked like he hadn't missed a day. It was great.
And what they did a great job with on that match to me, Rick, is they made it have the big fight feel. It didn't just feel like a SummerSlam main event. It felt like it was a big boxing event. It felt like a big UFC event. It had the big fight feel where you knew something was going to happen. You just didn't know what.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I stated earlier that day that on ESPN that I think that they're going to have to really dig to build the card for WrestleMania to be bigger than that card. The card was loaded from top to bottom.
So that's something worth talking about. A lot of people maybe missed it because they were watching the network, but you were on ESPN as kind of the go-home push to get the pay-per-view and go ahead and order the network and get the show. And this may be the first of a string of commitments from ESPN to WWE, isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it, I'm sure of a lot of it, without being told directly, as a result of Brock coming over to us, and in ESPN, of course, having several guys like Coach and Todd Grissom, who were former announcers for our company with ESPN. But it's a good fix for us, and it gives us that extra little push of notoriety that I think is great. I think the notoriety, or the push that we get, the legitimate push we get from ESPN, I think is a much better deal for us than something that we get from Jon Stewart, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I know that this isn't something that we talk about very often whenever you make an appearance, but the social media aspect blew up last week when you were on Raw with Jon Stewart. I really enjoyed the segment. What was your takeaway on it, and how did you feel about the way it came off?
Oh, I loved it. Oh, are you kidding me? Don't misunderstand me. I think John's a great guy, Jon Stewart. And I'm a big fan but it was a pretty legitimate interview because I'm such a big fan of John Cena's. No, it came off great, and I thought that I know Jon Stewart's a stand-up, and he can do a lot of stuff. I mean, a stand-up comic if he has to be, and he's going to start doing that now on a part-time basis, is what he told me. And actually formed a little bit of a friendship, but I thought it came across as real legitimate. Brooklyn's a tough crowd. It's tough for John everywhere, but that's a tough crowd. But I thought the segment came out great, and I love being part of it. I told Vince last night, what the hell? 1 week in, 1 week out, what's going on here?
That's awesome. So, hey, let's talk about Sting. We talked about it a little bit at the end of the podcast with Steve, but now we kind of have an idea of where they're headed with Sting now. He's going to be wrestling Seth Rollins at Night of Champions. What type of match do you think that'll be, and how happy are you to see him back in a WWE ring?
Well, I had a great time with him yesterday. I love Steve Borden and Sting. I mean, just, so many years and so many matches and, so many people to this day, watch the network and watch Sting and I. So it's just a great period of life for me. And I love him as a person. I think it's great. I think the match with him and Seth Rollins will be a phenomenal match. Seth Rollins is a really unique individual in the ring. You know what I mean? And I personally did not like the finish that they had with Hunter because they're involving 40 guys at WrestleMania. So I think they'll have a finish in the match that'll be something that the people are happy with. I don't know which way it'll go. But then again, I'm pretty sold on the fact that why you wouldn't take any steam off of Seth Rollins, because he has become a phenomenal performer. And he's got a brand right now that is going through the ceiling.
Yeah, I'm really happy that they kept the belt on him, and I'm anxious to see what they do with the Sting thing. I know that it's got a lot of old school fans excited to see Sting back, and I thought they did a great job with the old Funk in the Box trick at the end of Raw. I'm excited to see where this leads, but I'm also excited for us to talk to Vince Russo today, because I really thought when we first started doing these, this was somebody you would never, ever do a podcast with. How's your relationship with Vince Russo been? I guess me being just this not being something that fans know, I never would have imagined you guys were friendly. What's the deal?
Well, I've never had a problem with Vince Russo. I just think he had it with me, and I don't know that I came out. I can't remember. Somebody told me I must have said it in conversation. The ship had sailed at WCW when he got there. I mean, the damage was done. He didn't do anything any different. I didn't like some of the stuff he did, but the damage was already done in terms of the direction the company was going. I mean, that ship sailed. I'm anxious to ask him how he got along with Bischoff and TNA and all that. I mean, those are the kind of questions I want to know. I got no problem with him. He was always respectful to me, and working for him at TNA was a piece of cake. I mean, there was just so much pressure and so many people doing so many things, behind each other's back at WCW. It was ridiculous. So I had no problem at all working for him at TNA, and I didn't like the fact that we did that Hall of Fame ring with I can't think of the character, but once I explained my thought process to him, he was on board, and we were fine. It just, but I just don't think you pass around your Hall of Fame ring, but that ship has sailed as well. So what the hell? What was that character's name?
I honestly have no idea what you're talking about.
No. At the Hall of they had me Abyss. But you remember the Hall of Fame ring was up against him in a match?
Well, I have to be honest, Rick. I don't watch TNA. I know I've just exposed the business right here.
Yeah, but you were the wrestling guru.
Well, but I don't count TNA, and I know that makes
Conrad Meltzer, hello, Thompson.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, you're not the only one doesn't watch TNA. FYI.
That is hilarious. So, anything in the news lately about TNA wrestlers that you've seen?
No, not a thing that I want to talk about. No. I'll tell you what is in the news is my daughter won the right to wrestle Nikki Bella at Night of Champions.
Dude, how cool
last night on Raw. That's in the news, and that's current, and I'm really excited about that.
Is this something you would have ever imagined would have happened this fast? I mean, I know that she's been wrestling for a while now, and she's been in Florida for a while, but just being on the main roster now, 6-8 weeks? Now she's already got a title
she
shot.
does. The thing of it is that she's only really been wrestling for a little less than 3 years if you take the time off with the passing of my son, and then she had an injury that took her out for 3 months. So you take 6 months off of that, and it was 3 years in July that she moved to Florida. So she's just 2 months in. She probably, and probably hasn't had 150 matches yet. Is that amazing?
And it's worth mentioning, I don't think that you've shared that story very often publicly, but you kind of share the backstory about what Charlotte was doing in her previous life before she got into wrestling and kind of how that all came about, because it wasn't always the plan.
No, as a matter of fact, we were in the process of leasing a facility for her to have her own personal training studio, because she was working for a company called Charlotte Fitness, and she was their top producer, going between 2 gyms, and she was making like close to $85,000 on a 60-40 split. You know what I mean? Which is that's where the gym takes 40% of the pay. But she was working 50 hours a week too. It was a lot of work, but in reality, it's no more work than she's working now. So, but she loves this. She came to the Hall of Fame induction in 2012 at WrestleMania in Miami, and John Laurinaitis looked at her. Johnny Ace at the time, head of talent relations, and said, "Why aren't you wrestling?" And she looked and said, "I don't know. I've never thought about it." She never had. By half hour later, she came over and asked me, "Do you think I could wrestle?" And I said, "I'm sure you can, but do you really want to do this? What about this facility we're going to rent for you?" I mean, that was April, and in July she was in Tampa.
And it all worked out, man, and now she's getting her first title shot, in the big time, on pay-per-view, not a champion.
Yeah, God, every time I see her on Raw, and I was there at the event last night and just seen her, and the thing that she's really gotten keen on now, she's got her interview down. That's hard, and she had a hell of an interview last night. And she's got it down. I mean, I couldn't be more proud. I mean, it's a lot of pressure, and she handles all that, and she's a beautiful young lady. All those girls are great. I mean, Becky's doing great. Sasha's doing great. Bayley, who's now the NXT champion, is doing great, and I think there's a lot of chemistry with all the girls, and I think they all get along real well, and they all, I think, have a mutual respect for each other, which is unusual in a girls' locker room, and just as it is in a boys' locker room.
And almost as unusual, we're going to go to commercial, and when we come back, we've got Vince Russo and Ric Flair. Come on,
Let's do it.
All right, you've been scouting players for your season-long fantasy football team for months. Now you get to put that knowledge to the test every single week at DraftKings.com. It's America's favorite one-week fantasy football site, and the only place you could start the season by winning $2 million in Week 1. $2 million, Rick.
$2 million is a lot of money. I mean, that's Conrad Thompson money.
You've got $10 million in prizes up for grabs, including $2 million for first place and $1 million for second. So even if you come in second, you're still a millionaire, Rick.
I know, it's huge. DraftKings.com is it.
And here's the deal. It's 1 week fantasy, and that means no season-long commitments. It's fantasy football on demand. You play where you want, when you want, and with the players you want. You've never experienced football like this. You just pick your players, pile up the points, and pick up your cash. That's it. This isn't fantasy as usual. This is DraftKings. Welcome to the big time. Now, there's a few preseason games left to go right before the season kicks off, but we're really closing in. So hurry to DraftKings.com right now and use that promo code. What is it, Rick?
It's FLAIR.
And you're going to find out how to play for free and win your share of the $10 million being given away in Week 1. Enter that promo code again for free entry now.
At the one and only DraftKings.com.
What's that promo code, Rick?
FLAIR at DraftKings.com.
DraftKings.com. DraftKings.com.
Woo! Vince Russo.
Rick, how are you?
I'm good. Why did you leave me in the desert to die?
I'll tell you, man. I've been waiting to tell you for 15 years.
No worries. I'm just kidding.
I know.
No, we were riding across the country, and Vince, this is a true story, buddy. And Vince Russo looked at me and said, we're in a limousine, right? We're drinking. I was anyway. Vince doesn't drink. I don't think Ed was drinking either. We're riding out with Eddie Guerrero, and Eddie and I were drinking. And he goes, "You don't like me." And I said, "Why don't I like you?" He said, "Because you're friends with Jim Cornette." I said, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Hey, Rick, I swear I had, forgotten all about that. But when I saw that you said that, I remembered it. I mean, I absolutely remembered the conversation after you said it.
Yeah. No, I just thought, I said, "Why nobody? He never talked about you." I mean, I hadn't talked to Cornette for 10 years.
That's the paranoia of the wrestling business, man.
Yeah, I know. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm hanging in there. How about you?
I'm great, thank you. Very busy, active, follow my living vicariously through my daughter. And I got to say, to this day,
she's doing a tremendous. I don't know.
I think you've changed it now because I called you today. But one of the nicest things I've ever seen, and I always appreciate this, was if I used to call Vince Russo, his daughter was on the voicemail. Remember that?
That's right. Yeah. You know what the funny thing is about that, Rick? Roddy left me a great message when he heard my daughter's voice that I saved because it was really, really, really special, man.
No, it was so cool. I called him one day and I thought, well, that's nice, you know. This guy really isn't as big a dick as he acts. He couldn't possibly have that.
Yeah, Rick, especially now that I can take credit for Charlotte's career because she was part of our storyline 15 years ago.
Yes, I know. Are you kidding? She almost killed everybody in the ring.
Exactly. So, I mean, I've been taking credit for her success. I hope that's okay with you.
No, hey, don't. When Vince Russo told her to hit the ring, he had no idea what he was doing.
That's true, man. That is absolutely true.
No problem, man. She's jumping Jack Flash. Well, thank you. So, tell me what's going on. I know you're not working with TNA anymore, right?
No, Rick. I'm pretty much on my own, man. I'm just hustling, trying to make it day to day. You know, I have a podcast channel on a station called the Realm Network. I do podcasting like every day of the week, and then I just started up last Saturday night on iHeartRadio. I do a show once a week.
On what radio?
iHeartRadio.
Oh, cool. Well, very good.
Yeah.
Wrestling shows, I take it?
Yeah, it's wrestling, but it's kind of wrestling / entertainment. I mean, just have a good time. So I'm just hustling to stay above water.
So tell me, I've been dying to ask this question. I'm sure Conrad has a bunch of them. Do you and Bischoff get along?
That's that's hard to say, Rick. I mean, because basically at the end of the day, like, we're just two totally different people. And I mean, we were put to work together on two separate occasions by two separate companies. I don't think the chemistry was ever there, but I think when we worked together, I mean, I think we respected each other, and we both tried to make it work. But I just think that because we're two totally separate people, it was just difficult.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I just. You were there when I came to TNA, and I came with Eric and Hulk at the same time, pretty much, right?
Yes, yep.
So you were already there, and I never really understood. I knew you were booking the shows and writing the shows, because that wouldn't have been his forte. But so who, in a chain of command, who had the power?
Well, Rick, that was really tough because, I'll be totally honest with you. I mean, first of all, for starters, when Dixie, went ahead and hired Eric and Hulk, like, she never told me. And, at the time, I was writing the TV with, Matt Conway because she had sent Jeff Jarrett home because of the Kurt Angle incident. So, me and Matt were really writing the show and trying to take it in a certain direction. She never told me about Eric and Hulk. And then, next thing I know, they're there. So, originally, Eric was just supposed to be involved in the creative as it pertained to Hulk, because, Hulk had creative control. That was part of his contract with TNA. So Eric was supposed to sit in the creative meetings as it pertained to Hulk. But then again, Dixie, she kind of had a bad habit of doing this, kind of working behind my back, slowly.
Oh, hey, listen, I totally understand. She'd rather can tell you anything to your face, but she doesn't like to take the responsibility for decisions that hurt people's feelings. That's just the way it is.
Slowly but surely, Eric's sitting, in the writing room representing Hulk, but now all of a sudden he's a full-fledged member of the creative team. So now, we'd be in there discussing things, and then at that point, Eric would then take the things to Hulk. Hulk would change things, would want to change things a lot, the day of the show. And, that... Oh,
I know, at 5 o'clock. And the show was
exactly. And then, Rick, because Eric and I weren't seeing eye to eye, and Dixie didn't want to really deal with it, then she brought in Bruce, as another layer to kind of be the liaison between Eric and myself. And that's when, man, there were so many chefs, and it was all over the place. And that's kind of when I just decided, what, this isn't healthy for company, and I went home.
Yeah, well, you and Bruce had worked together before, right? I mean, not in writing, but wasn't Bruce at WWE when you were there?
Yeah, Bruce and I had worked together. As a matter of fact, I mean, the truth is, Rick, that Bruce kind of took me under his arm. As he was my mentor. I mean, he really was. And then what happened was JJ went to WCW, Bruce went into JJ's spot, and I kind of took Bruce's spot on creative. But again, it was one of those things at TNA where, I knew Bruce needed work, and, I wanted to return the favor to him of everything he had done for me. So, I extended the olive branch for him to come in and kind of, help me with the TV. Next thing I know, a week later, again, not to my knowledge, he was meeting with Dixie, and, about a week later, he was my boss. So that's when I said, what?
I didn't know any of that. See, that's strange. It's just, I like Bruce Pritchard very much, as I'm sure you do.
Oh, yeah, I just had him on my show, Rick, about a week ago. I mean, I had him on for a couple
I just
hours.
Can't figure out why he's not somewhere in the business right now, because Bruce is a very smart guy, like yourself.
Yeah, no, I agree, absolutely. I mean, that's why I wanted to bring him on my show, because... But, like I said, it's, I just hate to say this, but it's the truth. I mean, Dixie just did so much more damage than good, just not being upfront and not being honest, and, everything was underhanded and behind people's back. I can't tell you how many times as my boss, she would tell me something, and then it always ended with, but you can't say anything, you can't tell anybody. And it was just so hard to work under that umbrella.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of my relationship. You know who Barry Bloom is, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Barry Bloom, the agent, the suspect agent, 00, whatever he is.
Right,
my favorite line about Barry and Braverman, I would say, it was a Barry, don't tell anybody I told you, Bloom, and Michael, don't tell Barry I told you, Braverman.
Yeah, she...
those two bandits, man, are still... They're not even agents. They're not even licensed agents.
Yeah, it was tough, and that's kind of how she set the stage, because, you got to remember that, I started with Jeff at the beginning of TNA. So, I was close with Jeff for, 15 years or whatever from WWE. And then immediately when she came in, with her money, it was constantly, she would constantly be in my ear and talking to me about Jeff and this and that. And it was always, but you can't say anything. You can't tell them. And I just used to sit there and say, Dixie, we are all adults. If you have an issue with Jeff, you need to tell Jeff, not me. And that's just the way she did business, man. It just made it difficult.
Oh, I know. I was there. I'll always have a lot of time for her because she was always real respectful and nice to me. But it was just so different after working up north. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my God.
Oh yeah. No, I mean,
that's the easiest job I ever had in my life.
Yeah,
and
Rick,
you always let me take a blade, so it was even easier.
I think everybody says, she's the nicest woman in the world. I mean, hands down, no question about it. But to be in the position she was in, man, I just don't think she was a very good boss.
The thing of it is, I would take her all day long over that Dean Broadhead. What was his name?
Yeah, Dean Broadhead.
Jesus, what a dick. Holy cow. That guy was
Bruce was just saying the same thing to me about a week ago.
Oh, my God. He was impossible to deal with. My God. Well, tell me something. Well, first of all, Conrad, geez. This is the longest Conrad has not talked since I've met him. Conrad knows more about wrestling, I say this all the time, Vince, than Dave Meltzer.
Well,
oh, wow.
No, he does. Vince, he'll have, I'm sure, knowing him, he has done a whole Wikipedia on you. Go ahead, Conrad.
Well, I don't know about Wikipedia, but I do want to ask a little bit about when you first got started booking for Vince. I know that you were working on the magazine, but I don't think everybody knows the story of how you transitioned from working at the magazine to then being involved in the creative process with Vince. Can you kind of carry us through what that looked like?
Yeah, Conrad, I'll try to be as brief as I can because it's a long story, but I'll try to keep it brief. Conrad, I was the editor of the magazine at the time, and we're talking about, in my opinion, as a wrestling fan now, I'm talking about as a wrestling fan that grew up on the WWF since, 72, 73. I was working for the WWE, and in my opinion, the product had really hit an all-time low. And I'm talking about these are the days of, Freddie Joe Floyd and, the Goon and the plumber, T.L. Hopper. These are the days I'm talking about. At the same time, and WCW had just started with the NWO. And, here I was as the editor of the magazine. I thought the product was really bad at the time. And I was watching the NWO, and I was like, holy crap, we are dead in the water. And I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to work, for WCW. So what happened was, Jeff Jarrett was my friend at the time. Kevin Nash was my friend at the time. And they convinced Eric Bischoff to give me a call. And one night, out of the blue, I'll never forget, it was after a Nitro. I'm working for the WWE as the editor of the magazine. Eric did call me. And, quite frankly, I got to be honest with you, but I say this all the time. At that point, that was probably the most arrogant conversation I ever had with anybody. But I also say this. At that point in time, Eric deserved to be arrogant. He was on top of the world. The business was changing. And, who was I, at that point? So I had a conversation with him. He kind of had a chip on his shoulder.
Weren't you the head writer at WWE at that time?
No, Rick. I was just working on the magazine at that time, but I was also sitting in on creative meetings with Cornette and Bruce. But I really wasn't doing anything. I was just shutting my mouth and listening.
See, I thought you were the head writer there at one time. I'm way out of sync.
Yeah, no, not at that time. So basically, after I had that conversation with Eric and I hung up. The truth is, Conrad, I felt so dirty the next day because I was a WF guy and WWF guy my entire life. And I hated the fact that I had this conversation behind Vince's back because I felt very, very loyal to him. So I remember the next day I scheduled a meeting with Linda McMahon, who was my boss at the magazine. And, my whole intent was to basically say to Linda, listen, if all you think I'm capable of doing is the magazine, I need you to tell me that because I think I'm capable of doing more. And quite frankly, if Linda would have said that yeah, Vince, I just think you're going to be the magazine writer, I probably would have pursued WCW, balls to the wall, pardon my French. So I go up in Linda's office to have the meeting, and literally a minute in, Vince McMahon walks in the office and just sits down. And, Conrad, I think there are times in all our lives where, that time comes where you got to kind of take your balls in your hand, but one or two things are going to happen. Either you're going to get fired or either you're going to go to the next level. I mean, that's what's going to happen. But I had enough confidence in myself to roll the dice. So basically, with Vince sitting there, I said that. I said, listen, if you think I'm just capable of writing the magazine, let me know, because I need to know that. I think I'm capable of a hell of a lot more. And Vince got hot at me. I mean, and he cut a promo on me. Who do you think you are? This, that, and the other thing. And I remember sitting there so naively. And I just said to Vince, Vince, listen, I'm not here asking you for more money or more power. It's not about that. I said, I want to help you. And, I left his office. This was a Friday. I mean, not knowing if I was going to be fired. I mean, I had no idea. I mean, like I said, I was prepared to be fired. And then, Conrad, what happened was the next Monday, Raw hit an all-time low, and I'll never forget it. It was the night that the show, half of the crew was in the States, the other half of the crew were in England, and they were playing the two shows back-to-back simultaneously. The show was horrible. I remember watching it at home. It was absolutely atrocious. So sure enough, Tuesday morning, the next morning, I go in the office, and I went in early. And as soon as I went in, my phone rang, and it was Vince had a assistant. Her name was Beth at the time. And, Beth said to me, Vince wants to see you up here ASAP. No joke, Conrad. I knew Raw was bad. I knew the conversation we had on Friday. And as I'm riding the elevator up, I'm preparing myself to be fired. I mean, I accepted the fact that he probably was in a real bad mood. And, I'm literally thinking in my mind, what am I going to do next? I had a family I had to support. I had a little baby at the time. So then I get up to Vince's office, and to make matters worse, he had, all his right-hand men sitting around the table, every one of them. It was Bruce, it was Patterson, it was Cornette, Shane was there. I mean, anybody who was anybody was in that room. So now I'm thinking, okay, he's going to make an example out of me. Vince is not happy. He's gonna make an example out of Vince Russo. So, at this point, I'm saying to myself, let's just get this over with, and let's just end this. And sure enough, he's got the magazine in his hand. So, the stage is set. Just do it, Vince. Just let me go home with some dignity. And he literally took that magazine and slammed it on the table, and he basically said, this is what our show needs to be. And I got to tell you, Conrad, I'm not kidding you when I tell you I was absolutely shocked. I was sure that it was going the other way. And I was absolutely floored. And literally from that point on, I started writing the television with Vince.
Well, that's what I thought. I knew at some point in time you were doing that because, we just discussed that with Bruce the other day. and I thought maybe I misunderstood Bruce. So you were, whether you're the head writer or not, but you were one of the writers, the main writers for the show.
Yeah, well, Rick, like Rick, what happened was Bill Watts brought me in. Bill Watts brought me in to sit in with the writing committee. Literally, Rick, a week later, Bill Watts was sent home. So, he had brought me in, and I was still, sitting in creative with Bruce and Jim Cornette at the time. But like I said, man, I was just starting out, and it was, I was keeping my mouth shut and kind of just listening and learning, at that point. And that was about the time that Vince had this meeting.
Well, at what point in time did Austin come on board?
Oh no, he at that time, he was already there. But keep in mind, Rick, he was doing, the ringmaster, Ted DiBiase.
He wasn't Stone Cold yet then.
No, not at all. The Stone Cold character developed while I was writing the television with Vince. I remember that vividly. It was one opportunity. And, Steve just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
And that was really the birth of Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah, well, it was, and also, I'm sitting there, because how I hated those guys going out there night after night after night saying we're going to close the doors at WWE. The NWO, and it's not personal against the guys, but the Hulk and Kevin and Razor. Those guys, they made so much money working for Vince, and basically it made their character, who they are, and defined them in the business. And to be standing in the ring with Bischoff saying we're going to shut down WWE. I said to myself, they don't know this guy very well. He'll figure something out, man. And when it comes back, because when Austin came on, and with you writing it or whoever else was helping you, I looked at that and I said, man, Austin, because when Bischoff fired Austin, I thought he was crazy.
Yeah, Rick, I swear, this is a true story, and this is why, I give so much credit to Austin. And Rick, especially in today's a landscape, because I have a feeling, just by watching the show, I have a feeling that today there aren't a lot of guys that really speak up at the WWE. Maybe there is, and I'm totally wrong. It's just a feeling that I get. But I always give Austin all the credit in the world, because I'll never forget when we used to have a new character come on board. I used to sit down with Vince, and Vince would tell me what he wanted, and then, I would, start writing the promos for them, start working on the characters, etc. So, Austin comes aboard, and, Vince's directions to me were, he's the ringmaster, he's never to say a word, Ted DiBiase is to do all his talking. Now, meantime, Rick, you have to remember, I was watching Austin on WCW. I was watching Stunning Steve, and I kind of looked at Vince like, really? You don't want this guy to talk? And Vince says, no, Ted does all his talking. So at that point now, Steve, literally every time I saw him, he was like, Vince, you gotta get me on the mic. You gotta find some kind of an opportunity for me. I'm better than this. Every time. And Rick, I'll never forget that while I was writing one of the shows, there was just a 2-minute opportunity to put Steve on color during a match. Literally 2-3 minutes. He's on headsets during a match. So I wrote it in. He went out there. He put the headsets on. I'm watching from the gorilla position.
Now, is this as Stone Cold or as the ringmaster?
This is as the ringmaster.
Okay.
And I'm sitting there at gorilla, and Austin now starts talking, and I was just like, holy crap. I mean, I knew, right then and there that Steve had changed the landscape. And then shortly right after that, again, these are the big things that you never forget. I'm sure you've got a laundry list, but I'll never forget it, King of the Ring, when, before he cut the promo on Jake where he first used Austin 316, he bounced it off of me first. And I knew it was good, like it was his verbiage. I did not write that. He had the Austin 316, and it was all him. I knew it was good, but then when he did it and I heard it, and he delivered that last line with Austin 316, I'm like, things will never be the same again. But that was just, that was all Steve Austin.
Yeah.
So Vince,
I'm his biggest fan. When he used to go out there and say 1 margarita, 2 beers, I mean, it was. I'll tell you something. The people do woo, and I appreciate the respect of all the people. But when Austin left, even when I was in the ring, the marks are going, what?
Yeah, I know, right.
Jesus.
Oh, yeah. I do blame him.
I'd go woo, they'd go what?
I do blame him for that, Rick. That was one of the things. I mean, that watch thing started like after I left. But, even when they were doing it to Jon Stewart the other day, I'm like, this thing is never going to end.
No, that was tremendous. We had him on the show last week, and when he'd do those 2 margaritas, 3 shots of tequila, 2 beers, what?
Yeah, tremendous.
I was dying. And then here's the thing that kills me. The SOB was getting paid to drink on TV. What the hell?
Exactly. But, like I said, Rick and Conrad, it's kind of like I look at today's landscape, and listen, obviously I haven't been at the WWE in 15 years, but I kind of look at the landscape, I kind of look at the way that characters are being developed, because that's the way I look at a wrestling show, because that's me. So I'm looking at characters and I'm looking at storyline. That's what I look at. And to me, it comes across as just so everybody seems the same, and it seems to me like they're cutting promos that are safe, and nobody is taking the kind of chance like CM Punk did with the pipe bomb. And at the end of the day, that's what got Austin over. That's what got Ric Flair over. That's what got Mick Foley over. I mean, when you look at any legend of the business, they went out and they own that microphone, and people like you, Rick, and Austin, and Rock, and you. As a writer, I can't put words in those people's mouths.
Yeah, I know. I have a difficult time with that, as you know. I understand, and one of the things that's changed a lot for guys is the importance of the bullet points, meaning like the next pay-per-view, the date, the city, or whatever. There's a lot that goes into the views. But and I probably could have done that too, but my deal was, as you know, if I liked being second. So, like, if Dusty was talking ahead of me, it just got me more revved up. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
But if I heard what someone was saying about me, it was no problem. And I think that's good, because you fire the guys up, without being malicious. But you can fire your opponent up and get a good interview out of them just saying something that makes them mad. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? But just say what you feel about yourself.
Yeah, Rick, there were certain guys, there were certain guys that depended on me to write for them, because, talking wasn't their forte. And I knew who those guys were. I knew who I really had to write a lot for and produce a lot. I knew those guys. But then you have, the other guys, basically where it's like, okay, Rock, this is what we need you to get over tonight. Period. End of story. And, if you don't give the guys the freedom to just run and be themselves and get that personality and that character over, and that's what I just feel is going on, like, a lot in the WWE. So I feel like so many guys are like that hamster running around in the wheel in the cage because they're going by script. They're saying what they're being told to say, and you can't blame them. They work there. That's their job, but they're not being allowed to let loose. And I think that's missing in today's business.
Yeah, it's just hard to say. I'm actually, I'm there quite a bit, and I see it. As Austin alluded to it, it's like everybody walks around on glass because there's uncertainty as to who's going to be there tomorrow, if that makes any sense. And it's just a different time in the business. But I think, and Conrad and I talk about it, I think, Seth Rollins has got it down pretty good, and he's getting more confidence, and where he's definitely 10 times the interviewer he was 6 months ago. And there's other guys that can talk and character, but it's the thing that I see is that I wouldn't change a bit of it for me. But it's that old saying, you got about 4 minutes to walk out that door and show Vince McMahon there's something different about you than anybody else. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. No,
I mean, I had robes, clothes. I had a lot of enhancements. I didn't say it worked out for me financially so well, but it wasn't like I didn't come prepared.
but Rick, let me ask you this. Here's something very important because you basically said it, and it's kind of like I figured it. Okay, like I get the feeling too, like. There are people working on eggshells, and the way the wrestling business is, Rick, let's face it, there isn't a WCW. Where are these guys going to go if, God forbid, they get heat with the office? So I understand all that. But, Rick, I have to ask you a question, like, even in your case, especially starting out, before you were Ric Flair, weren't there times, though, Rick, in your career, especially early on, where you kind of had to go out there and take chances in order to become Ric Flair, in order to stand out from the crowd?
It's funny. I tell this to everybody. It was just I came from Minneapolis, where I started with Dusty, and I started with Murdoch and Rhodes and Bockwinkel and Stevens and. Jesus, Larry Henning, Harley Race. The list was endless of guys there when I started. And then after a year, I went to Carolina, where George Scott was with Wahoo, and I was surrounded with so much talent that, and the guys liked me, because when young guys started the business, when I started, a lot of the older guys didn't like the young guys. But I wanted to be a heel, so that already took the pressure off the older baby faces. Unlike a guy like Steamboat, man, those baby faces like Wahoo and Paul Jones and those guys, they hated Steamboat. I had to fight for everything in the world to get them a break. Mm-hmm. Nobody wanted to see a handsome young kid come along,
right?
Especially if you're a baby face with some mileage on you. But for me, I was a heel. I was just cannon fodder, man. So they loved me. I could talk, say what I wanted to say. They bounced around, beat me every night. Hell, one night I was in Charleston wrestling Wahoo, and George Scott happened to be at the show. Wahoo beat me in the middle of the ring. The people were going crazy. He came back down and beat me again. And the crowd was, I was so naive, the crowd was going crazy again. He came back down and beat me 3 times. I walked back, and George Scott pulled me aside and said, "What the hell are you doing?" I said, "I don't know. I thought that was good." He said, "You already beat you once." I didn't know any better. beat me 30 times. What the hell?
Hey, Rick, let me ask you a question as it pertains to the business today, because I'm real interested in this. Say Ric Flair was just breaking into the business today, and say Ric Flair was breaking into the same WWE today, that we're seeing today, where, again, guys are in tough positions because there's really no place else to go. So, they kind of follow instructions to the T, just to make sure they have job security, they have feelings. I understand all that. But Rick, if you were placed in that situation today, and you're just breaking into the business, but the Nature Boy is inside of you. He's there, and he exists, but yet they keep giving you, scripted promos, say this, say that.
If I broke into business now, I'd be fired within 30 minutes. Social media would keep me alive as I was walking in the door of the building.
Say that again, Rick, I missed it.
From conduct the night before, as you know.
Yeah. But
I enjoyed working. What's that?
Well, Rick, my question is, would you take that gamble in order to be noticed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Most definitely. But and I think the character would have been everything would have worked, but I would have had to really kind of like that movie Wolf, chain myself to the radiator in the room at night.
Right.
Part of what made life fun for me is that I wrestled hard, I worked out hard, but I did some damage to myself and other people between 11 and 4.
Yeah.
So, hey, let's switch gears and talk a little WCW.
So I have to comment up by saying that since Conrad hangs around me now, he tells me that his liver light's on once in a while. So
my check liver light. I woke up SummerSlam and my check liver light was on. So, hey, Vince, let's talk a little bit about WCW. I know we kind of...
And Vince, just as an FYI, how in the hell have you been in this business so long? You don't do drugs, you don't drink. How do you do it?
Oh, man, I just used to, Rick, literally, this is an absolute shoot, Rick. The show would be over. I'd walk in the hotel. I would look to my left and see what was going on in the bar, and I would know in my mind nothing good is going to come out of that, and I literally would go right to my room and lock myself in.
Why couldn't I learn that? What was wrong? Why was I so thick-headed?
Yeah, Rick, if you were on the outside looking in and you saw what was happening, you would know nothing good is going to come out of that.
Well, I know what's happening because it was probably me. You just shook your head and said, he is nuts, and walked away.
Bingo, there you go. Exactly.
Oh, good. Hey, can I ask you one more question? Oh, Conrad, go ahead. You were up.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question about WCW. I know we kind of teased it at the beginning. Talk to us about when we're in the meeting, you're booking some TV for WCW, and the plan on Nitro is to drive Ric Flair out into the desert and bury him. How does that idea come about?
Okay, Conrad, can I tell you something? Nobody has ever asked me that question. Because, Conrad, listen, when I sat down, especially when me and Ed Ferrara were partnering up, nothing was done without a story, and nothing was done without a game plan. We did everything for a reason. Now, Conrad, I want to go back to a couple of weeks before the desert scene, because the desert scene with Rick happened just when Ed and I started working at WCW. And let me tell you what it stemmed for, because I think it's important that you know the backstory. And about maybe you can go back and watch the shows. I mean, so you know I'm being honest with you. About maybe a week or two before Ed and myself arrived on the scene to write for WCW. I was watching Nitro. I was trying to get to know the characters and the players. I was kind of doing my homework. This was the first time I was going to be working with a lot of people, especially Ric Flair. And Conrad, I'll never forget, and this is the God-honest truth, okay? You have to understand, Vince Russo grew up a Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, absolute mark. Hulk going way when he was a heel in the WWF before he ever even had a babyface run. That's how far back I go. With Rick growing up in Long Island, we saw championship wrestling, from Georgia, so I knew Rick really well. So, Conrad, about 2 weeks before Ed and I were going to start, WCW put Rick and Hulk in the main event on the show, wrestling. And I'll never forget, I'm sitting at home, and literally they had Rick and Hulk going for like a long time. It was about a 15, 20-minute match. And as I'm watching this, I'm saying to myself, they are making the two biggest legends in the business just two wrestlers on the card. They were having the main event. It was a 20-minute match. Let's face it, the truth of the matter is neither guy, Rick or Hulk, were in the prime of their careers. They were letting the match go on way too long, and I'm like, these guys are just two other wrestlers on the card. They deserve better than this. So, in my mind, what I wanted to do was I wanted to take Hulk. I wanted to take Rick. I wanted to get them in that legendary special spot that only they deserved to be in. I did not want Rick and Hulk just being wrestlers on the card. I felt they deserved a lot more of that. So the plan was that we were going to knock off the legends one by one. I think at that time, if you remember, Rick was dropped off in the desert. At that time, I think we made Hogan lay down for Sting or Sting lay down for Hogan, one of the two, but that eliminated Hulk. So now Rick was off of TV. Hulk was off of TV. I remember at that time it was the powers that be. We had a scene where we fired Roddy Piper. And what we were going to do was we were going to do this across the board. Kurt Hennig was there. Hacksaw Jim Duggan was there. And one by one, we were going to eliminate the legends of the business without it being a main story. They were just going to be dropping off the face one by one. And then the plan was when all these guys were on the shelf and we set the table and we set the stage, we were going to bring them all back united, if you can almost think of like a Marvel's The Avengers. So we were going to bring back all these legends united. And basically the idea was put them in the spotlight, have them work, with each other as a group, like I said, shine the light on them in the proper light. That was the plan. And that's what we were working towards. And then, basically 3 months in, they call me in the office. They're telling me we're going in another direction. I said, okay, I don't agree with that direction, so I'm going home. And the very next week, they just put Rick back on TV.
No, Vince, you've forgotten something. 2 weeks after the desert, you called me and told me to come to TV because Funk quit. You don't remember that?
I don't remember that, no.
Yeah, you and I had the damnest argument. I said, you just buried me and said I was going to be gone for 3 months. And then you wanted me to come back because Funk quit, you remember?
I'm sure that happened.
You didn't bring me back, but somebody quit and you needed me to be there. I can't remember who it was. I don't think.
Yeah,
it was
maybe it was Terry, because I remember that makes sense, because I remember there was a point when Terry was the guy in charge. So if he would have left, we definitely would have needed somebody of that caliber. So
yeah, you wanted me to come back in 2 weeks. I said, please don't do that to me.
Yeah,
it's kind of like when I retired. Long before you came, when I wrestled Hogan, WCW in '93, right, in the Halloween Havoc, and I'd already lost to him twice. We were in a cage, so I put my career on the line, and I was supposed to have a year off, right? I signed the contract. Bischoff said you'll have a year off. Lose to Hogan, right? I lose the match. 1 month later, I was back in the ring.
Yeah,
nobody else would. Vader and Rude. Hulk wouldn't work with him. So
yeah.
Jesus Christ, I wouldn't win.
But that was the story. That was the original story. One by one, these guys were going to disappear. All of a sudden, the Marvel Avengers were going to show up. And what I really liked about that storyline, to be honest with you, is almost the same dichotomy as the Avengers. These guys, if you looked at the history of their careers, a lot of times, they were pitted against each other. So, is Flair going to be able to get along with Hogan? Is Hogan going to be able to get along with Piper? Is Piper going to be able to get along with Savage? Very much like, years later when Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk, have an issue. But that was the idea. But again, we never got to play that out because in 3 months it was over.
Well, who knows? It's all worked out. I just want you to know, and I said it before you came on the show, I don't think you had anything to do with WCW going. That ship had sailed long before you got there, man.
Oh no, Rick! I don't know if you heard it or not, but listen, they grilled me in England. They blamed me for WCW losing $62 million. That the guy blamed.
No,
me
I said I was in England when I said it. You didn't do that.
No, that's what I'm saying. I don't know if you saw this or not, but I saw your England interview. And then I wrote a whole blog about you, thanking you, because Rick, you have no idea. For 15 years, Rick, I've had it here. You killed WCW. You killed WCW. You killed WCW. Wait, let me just finish.
I do have a whole idea because I was there for the whole time. Okay, right. Jim Herd forward. So. You had nothing to do with WCW getting closed down. Are you kidding?
Yeah, no, but Rick, this is what I want to say. For 15 years, that's all I heard. They wrote a book, The Death of WCW, with me on the cover for 15 years. And Rick, when you went out and said that on that show in England, since then, nobody has said a word to me. It was like the Pope spoke. The Pope set seriously. The Pope set the story straight, and nobody has brought it up.
I'm the first one to tell you. That was the most absurd comment I ever heard. That boat sailed before you even touched down in Atlanta.
but that's why I wrote about it and I thanked you and I put you over to the moon, and that's why I was so happy that I was going to get the opportunity to talk to you, because you have no idea what that meant to me. Because the minute Ric Flair said it, then everybody shut up.
Yeah, well, if I had known they were saying that, all you had to do was buzz me up earlier. I could have resolved that issue. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
You had nothing to do with that, buddy.
Yeah, I do appreciate that, Rick.
When I had to argue with Eric Bischoff in Birmingham about doing a job for Conan, my boat had sailed. They want to know why I was seeing a shrink. I don't know. Why am I putting over Conan tonight? Because I'm telling you. You've got to be kidding me.
So, Vince, the thing online now that I've seen more and more, people give you a lot of props for your creative ideas and writing style, but they like to use the phrase, and I want to get your response to this, he needed an editor. Do you think that's a fair criticism or no?
Well, listen, Conrad, the simplest way I can put that is, and I'm a fact guy and I'm a number guy. I always got paid according to ratings. Listen, at WCW, I had a base pay, but then I also had a scale depending on the numbers. The higher the rating, I would get bonuses. So that's why when everybody says to me, "Oh, you," and Hulk even said this on one of the WWE Network shows. Hulk said, "Oh, when Russo came in, man, if you were 40 or over, your head was on a platter and you were going to be gone from WCW." And I'm saying to myself, are you freaking nuts? My paycheck depended on the ratings of Nitro. Do you think I'm going to take a Ric Flair and a Hulk Hogan and a Roddy Piper and put them on the sideline because what? I don't like wrestlers over their 40s? That was such an insane comment. I wanted to put those guys in the proper light and in a position where, they could be the legends they were once again. But the fact of the matter is, I'm a numbers guy. If you look at ratings history from the time Ed Ferrara and I left until today, you're looking at a 15-year decline in ratings straight at the WWE. There was 1 year where it went up a blip, but aside from that, from 2000 all the way to 2015, the ratings have gone down every single year. And and the fact of the matter is, if looking at numbers and looking at facts, this is a show that at one point, was
you think the last 8 years is due to my retirement?
Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. But
I had to throw that in there.
but the fact of the matter is, 15 years the ratings have declined. There was a point that Raw's ratings were at 8 million people. Now they're at about 3 million people. Okay, so they've lost half their audience. Now, of course, everybody will tell you time has changed. It's a different time. The landscape has changed. And so on and so on and so on. The National Football League on Monday night have not lost half of their audience. It's pretty much grown since 1999. But here's the facts, because I just deal in facts. A lot of people said Vince was that editor. Well, the fact of the matter is Vince McMahon is still there. And Vince McMahon has been there for the last 15 years as ratings have gone down every single year. So the fact is, if Vince was my editor, and that was the reason of the success behind, Vince Russo and the Attitude Era, well then how do we explain the next 15 years?
I have a comment on that, and this is my take on it. When you lose, basically think about it. Undertaker works part-time. The Rock is gone. Austin's gone. Shawn Michaels is gone. Ric Flair is gone. Triple H works once a year. They've lost so many marquee players. If you think about it, it's right now, they're building a brand. We're getting some of these guys over, like Seth Rollins is getting over, and hopefully Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose and that. But they've lost so many brand guys that the only really, if you think about it, the depth chart there, they're all healthy now for the first time in a long time. But the two big, without Randy Orton every day, who's trying to work a part-time schedule as we speak, and without John, it's hard to find the marquee names. You know what I'm saying? If you don't watch a show for a couple of weeks, you might not know who the people are. Wouldn't you agree with that?
But Rick, that's exactly my point. That's exactly my point. You go back to, prior to me being a writer, on the roster, you had T.O. Hopper, you had the Goon, you had Freddie Joe Floyd, you had what? That was the roster. I started writing Okay, and then, you know, all of a sudden, you know, these cast of characters come in. Now, listen, don't get me wrong. It was absolutely the perfect storm. They were, without a doubt, the greatest roster, perhaps, in the history of wrestling, without a doubt. I mean, Rock, obviously, is a movie star now. All of them were legends. All of them were legends. But here's the thing. A writer needed to give them material every single week.
Of course. No, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I don't think anybody's denying how smart you are and how much writing skill you had. I'm just saying to you that, you know, and you just said it yourself, you had an incredible roster, and that roster, as you said, is kind of like the roster we had in the 80s at the NWA. I mean, we had everybody going, and you know, a different story, but if Crockett had stayed east of the Mississippi, the NWA would probably still be in business.
Right. But Rick, here's the problem, and what you're saying is absolutely correct, but here's the problem, Rick. When you look back at the last 15 years since Ferraro and myself left, honestly, when you look back the last 15 years at the WWE, who have they gotten over? They obviously, John Cena is a huge star. I would consider Kurt Angle a huge star that they got over. I would consider Brock Lesnar a huge star that they got over. That's three guys in the last 15 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that, to me, that's not on the guys. But listen, the wrestlers go out to the ring. I've never seen on Monday Night Raw, I've never seen anybody go through the motions. I've seen balls to the wall from bell to bell non-stop. So it's not on the boys. It's on the material, you know, that the boys are given. And again, in 15 years, if you can only name three people they've really gotten over in the since the Attitude Era, that's somebody's fault.
So Vince,
but here's the deal: just as we're talking about talent, writers of your level don't grow on trees either.
But Rick, let me throw this scenario at you because you'll appreciate this, Rick. I look at a guy like Bray Wyatt, and I sit home and I listen to his promos, and I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? This guy is just unbelievable. The words that come out of his mouth, the way he delivers a promo. This guy, like, literally should be in movies. Forget wrestling.
So you're saying he's good, because I think he's great, yeah.
Okay, exactly, Rick, but Rick, since he's been on the scene, look at how many times the WWE creative team have dropped the ball on this guy. If you can't get a Bray Wyatt over to the level of an Undertaker, and he's got all the talent in the world, that's not on Bray Wyatt. Somebody's not doing their job.
Vince, not to be critical, but
I can't argue that either, right? Because I'm just saying I'm glad to hear you like him, because I think he's phenomenal, and I think
unbelievable.
And I didn't mean to leave him off that name of people that are branding, because he's building the brand too. I just on a different note, I just hope they keep him heel for a while, and because the people are starting to like him. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. But Rick, listen, one of the problems is, and Rick, you know this, it's wrestling 101. And nobody should have to be told this in the WWE creative room. You know, you brought up Seth Rollins as an example. Well, part of the reason why Seth Rollins is growing and getting better and better, and Rick, you'll appreciate this more than anybody. Listen, man, if you want to get somebody over, they got to be on TV every single week. And when they're on TV, they have to have a good story. They have to have a good role. But if you keep putting them out there consistently, they're going to get better and better and better. And you know, they're going to draw a bigger fan base. Consistency is everything. I mean, my God, how many times have I seen Bray Wyatt on the show? 2-3 weeks go by, Bray's not on the show. Okay, now he's on the show again. He's cutting a great promo. Another 2 weeks go by, no Bray Wyatt. There's no consistency, and if anybody should know, listen, you got to put the guys out there every single week to get them over. I would have to assume that Vince McMahon knows that.
In all fairness, I think Bray has been injured. They've kept him on a DL.
Yeah,
he's had a shoulder issue.
Yeah,
they've kept him on a DL.
Well, Rick, here's another perfect case in point. Okay, and I think you'll agree with this, and you too, Conrad. There was a period of 3 months when I was watching Raw, maybe 2 months. I don't want to exaggerate, but I was watching Sandow, and he was the highlight of every single show. And, you know, from a writer's perspective and from a storyline perspective, I'm sitting there and this guy's getting himself over. It's the little things and the nuances that he's doing. He's getting himself over. And week after week after week, the people were behind Sandow. Finally, they do the angle with The Miz. After that, they put him in the thing with Kurt Hennig's kid where he's making believe he's Randy Savage. You have not seen Sandow on television for the last 8 to 10 weeks. So I'm sitting there scratching my head saying, wait a minute. You put 3 months of investment in this guy. You put him on TV every week. He got himself over. The fans were loving him. Now he hasn't been seen anywhere for 3 months. You can't get guys over that way. You just can't.
But in fairness, Vince, isn't some of that because they were doing the spoof of the Hogan character, and now Hogan is persona non grata, so they needed to kind of shift the focus away from the old Mega Powers deal?
Well, let's be honest, Conrad. Should they have gone to that in the first place? Sandow was getting himself over doing things as Sandow outside of the ring. They were finally getting him out of the shadow of Miz and out of just being the stunt double. That's where they were going with the story. So the guy goes through all that, hits it out of the park. He's over with me. Why would you make the decision at that point to go from that to putting him in a Randy Savage gimmick?
Well, so what would you have done with it?
I would have just continued. You had to find him the right opponent. You had to get him in. You had to put him in the right story. And I just would have continued to put him out there every week and let him come into his own. The WWE has fallen into a lazy pattern, in my opinion. This is just my opinion. They've fallen into the pattern of thinking, if we put guys out there and they have good matches, they're going to get over. If anybody believes that for a second, they are absolutely out of their minds. It takes more than going out and having a good match to get a Ric Flair or an Undertaker or a Rock or an Austin or a Dusty, and we can go on and on over. Those guys did not get over by just going out and giving and having good matches week after week after week. And in my opinion, that's just the pattern the WWE has fallen into.
So, Vince, do you think what we really need to see on Monday Night Raw is Judy Bagwell on a pole? I mean, is it time for her triumphant return to mainstream television?
Well, I'll tell you right now, Conrad, I would bet you my house and my 3 children that Judy Bagwell on a pole would outdraw an 8-man tag team match with no stakes and nothing on the line that goes on for 15 minutes through 2 commercial breaks. I would bet you my house, my kids, and my dog that more people would tune in to see that.
I have no doubt. I would really like to see Judy Bagwell on a pole.
You have to get a heavy pole.
Not at the ballet either.
Oh, God, that's fantastic. You guys, we could do this all day long. Vince, this has been incredible. Thank you, and very enlightening.
Well,
really enjoyed this, man.
These are just my opinions, but you got to understand. I spent 20 years of my life, and my job was to assist people in getting over. Listen, The Rock is The Rock, Austin's Austin, Flair is Flair, Dusty's Dusty. But the writer, they have to give those stars the material to keep themselves over on that level every single week. I say this all the time. Look at Robert De Niro. Okay, Robert De Niro, made Raging Bull. Robert De Niro made The Godfather 2. Robert De Niro has made some of the greatest pictures in the history of movies. Well, Robert De Niro also was in Rocky and Bullwinkle. And Rocky and Bullwinkle was horrible, because what that means is Robert De Niro is only going to be as good as the material he's given. So, at the end of the day, yes, you have mega superstars. There will never be another Rick. There will never be another Austin. But somebody has to give them that material every week to keep them on that level.
So we talk a lot about the WWF and the Attitude Era events, and it's probably hard to pick, like, your proudest moment of that era or the thing that you think you're most proud of in your career, at that stage of your career with WWE. We always talk about the downs of WCW. What do you look back and say, man, we hit a home run with that, with both WCW and with TNA, because you had stints in both, and they weren't all bad. There was good stuff. What do you look back and say proudly, that was my best piece of business in WCW, and that was my best piece of business in TNA?
Well, Conrad, again, listen, people can say whatever they want to say about Vince Russo. Listen, I don't care what anybody says. First of all, there are a couple of things that happen in my case. First of all, I don't care what anybody says. New York is our stereotyped. When people see a New Yorker and they hear a New Yorker, they think a certain way. That's number one. Number two, when I was on WCW, and Rick knows this, any great performer knows this, the most successful character is going to be when you take who you are and you magnify that by 1,000%. Because now you're not going out there and you're not acting. You're being yourself, but you're magnifying it, and you're over the top. When I did that at WCW as the arrogant, cocky, brash New Yorker, people believed that's who I really was. And that is a fact, because when I was writing WWE television, I don't think you can find one single bad thing said about Vince Russo. But the minute I became a character on television, I honestly believe people bought into that hook, line, and sinker. That's who that guy really is. And on top of that, the third thing is why, the Vince Russo haters come out is, let's face it, the internet wrestling community is the smallest, base with the loudest voice, and these are the people that want 5-star wrestling matches, bell to bell, 15, 20 minutes. They don't want entertainment. And Vince Russo is an entertainment guy, because I've proven, Rick's proven, entertainment draws the masses. So if we're looking at WCW and TNA, it's real simple for me. When Ed Farrell and myself were hired, the last show that WCW did was a 2.5 rating. 3 months after that, we were at a 3.5. We were getting the building blocks in place. We were taking away everything that wasn't working, and we were building the house. So in the first 3 months, and the numbers are there for anybody to look at, we went from a 2.5 to a 3.5. Vince Russo went home. 3 months later, Brad Siegel called me back. WCW was back at the 2.5 where I had started 3 months earlier. At that point in time, I knew we lost them. We're not going to get them back again. We had our chance. TNA is real simple. Okay, when I was writing the television for TNA, we reached an audience of over 2 million people. And what people don't understand, Conrad, that to me is so ridiculous, and Rick can tell you, having worked at both places, Conrad, a lot of what goes into television writing, a lot of it depends on finances. When you're at the WWE, I can write a story where the Generation X is going to drive a rocket launcher up to the WCW building, okay? I know when I show up at TV, there's going to be a rocket launcher there. When we need a sports car to fill up with concrete for Austin, I know a sports car is going to be there. So you're more or less, doing these stunts or these spectacles that are huge, and people never forget. Austin driving a beer truck into the arena. All these things cost a lot of money. When I worked at TNA, there was no money. So when you're writing the show, all of these big stunts, all of these spectacles that people are going to remember, they're taken out of your arsenal immediately because there's no money. Here's a great story. We started, Tara had a spider. It was part of her gimmick, okay? Well, the spider had to have a handler at the show. The handler was charging TNA a couple of $100 to bring the spider to the show, okay? TNA cut Tara's spider because they couldn't afford the couple of $100. So you're talking about finances, and money are a big part of what you're able and not able to do. So TNA at one point, when Rick was there, was up to over 2 million people. Well, okay, where are they now? They lost their Spike TV deal. They're probably going to lose their Destination America deal, and they're not even drawing 400,000 people on a weekly basis. So, again, at the end of the day, it's not the things that I did, because, yes, I had bad ideas, and ideas are subjective. So no question, I had some bad ideas. I did some things I didn't like, but when all is said and done, I look at the numbers, and I look at the bottom line, and I look at, okay, how many people were watching at that particular time? Because that's the only thing we can really measure it on.
Vince, I didn't want to be negative. I was trying to end on a positive note. And
I don't think you'd be. No, that's just.
The only time anybody ever mentions your name with WCW or TNA, it's always negative. But my thing is, it couldn't have all been negative. Did you know? I mean, I guess your favorite WCW thing was you being an on-screen character based on your answer. But if not, what was the WCW moment where you were most proud of and thought, man, we hit it out of the park with that angle or that story or this moment?
Well, Conrad, first of all, I hated being a character on TV. I really did, and I've said this a million times. The only reason I did it was twofold. Number one, it came at the suggestion of Eric Bischoff. If you remember, my first 3 months there, when it was me and Ed, I was not on television. So number one, it came at, he suggested it. And number two, they were on my back so hard for instant ratings. They wanted ratings tomorrow. That I basically said, you know what, screw that. I'll go out there and I'll do it myself. That was my mindset at the time. So that point in time was not an enjoyable thing for me, being a character. But I'll tell you this, and I'm not saying it because he's on the phone. I had a blast doing the angle with Rick. I had a blast involving all his family members. I always, man, I don't know what it is. I always loved David. I always had such a spot in my heart for David. I don't know what it was. I think it was because he was such a great young man.
Well,
and
he's the greatest kid in the world. He's just too nice for the business.
Yes, exactly, Rick. He was not out of that.
I mean, I tell him that all the time. My son David is just too nice to be in this business.
Yeah.
He's way too insensitive for a guy like Dave. He just
absolutely. So like Conrad, that it meant a lot to me that I was able to get David in a storyline like that I think he deserved, I think he worked hard for. I was happy with that because, like I said, I grew up on Rick. And Rick was a guy that I idolized in the business. And I love the fact that, man, if I could help his son, that'll make me feel good. But aside from that, I mean, I thought the angle was good. I thought the angle was entertaining. Obviously, involving Reed back then. I mean, with just that was far and away the best fun I had in WCW.
Well, and we've had a lot of fun today on Woo Nation. We appreciate you joining us today, Mr. Russo. Before we get you out of here, let's make sure we get all the appropriate plugs. If people want to follow you on Twitter, and you are a fun follow, it's at the Vince Russo. And there's probably some other stuff that we should talk about with you as well there, Vince. Is there anything in particular you want to plug? I know you're doing the iHeartRadio gig, and you've got some podcast stuff. Where can people find all things Vince Russo?
Yeah, there are two things. Number one, you can go to VinceRussoBrand.com. I have a podcasting channel on the Realm Network, and that's how you get to VinceRussoBrand.com. And like I said, I just started a radio show on iHeartRadio, and if you go to KCOL, you could find it there. It's 10 o'clock Eastern. On Saturday nights. Hey, Rick, can I ask you a big favor?
Yeah.
Now, Rick, I got to tell you something. I've fallen into this trap about 5 times, but I don't think I'm going to fall into it with you. But I'm going to put you on the spot anyway. I've done a lot of other shows with the caveat of you come on my show, then I'll come on yours. And then, quite frankly, when I look for the favor to be returned, it magically has disappeared and is not there. So I would like to formally, Rick, there is so much I would like to talk about, you and certain things with you. I have a million questions that I could ask you that I know the fans would love. I would love you to be able to come on my show and do it.
I have no problem with that whatsoever. When do you want to do it?
Well, I'll text you and I'll let you know. I'll set it up. But Rick, it would mean the world to me. And I want to say this too, Conrad, before we go. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. And I'm not saying it now because, like I said, I wrote about it a month ago. Listen, the internet wrestling community, it's become the in thing to take shots at Vince Russo, to hate Vince Russo, to blame Vince Russo for everything. It's the cool, it's the hip thing to do. But like I said, Rick, when you went on that show in England, and, finally, Ric Flair, of all people, he could have went down that road as everybody else. He could have put the heat on Vince, and a million other people have done it. But when you went on that show and said what you said, about Vince was just a man trying to support his family, and, WCW was dead before he even got there. I got to tell you, Rick, and I'm being totally honest with you, I've been in the wrestling business since 1991. That was really the nicest thing that anybody has ever done for me, because in wrestling, they're going to jump on the gravy train. They're going to go with the interviewer. They're going to get themselves over. But when you took a stand there and you kind of set the record straight, I'm not kidding you, Rick. It literally brought tears to my eyes, and I'm glad I can personally thank you for doing that.
No problem, man. Give me a text me. Let me know what's up, okay?
All right, I definitely will, Rick. And Rick, thank you so much, Conrad. Thank you so much. I hope I didn't talk too much.
Oh, no, thanks for having us, man.
It was great. Thank you so much.